Hey, this is Tom Glavine, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on The Grueling Truth.
Hey guys, Graham here again. Chris is on vacation, so it is going to be just me on the show today. Should be a good one. Got a lot of things going on. Had the Diamond Resorts Invitational in Orlando. A bunch of former and current Major League players were there. Had a chance to catch up with a few of those guys who you will hear from later on in the show. And some news coming in some free agency stuff, maybe a couple of rumors, and also Jake Arrieta and Bryce Harper avoiding arbitration with the Cubs and Nationals, respectively. So we'll start there. What is arbitration? That's one of the probably biggest questions that a lot of guys get. Arbitration basically is for players who have at least 3 full seasons of service time and less than 6. At 6 years, you're a free agent, your contract's up, you can go find where you want to play and what you want to be paid. If you qualify for arbitration, obviously you can still reach an agreement with the team, but if not, what basically happens is both sides, the team and the player or the player's representatives, submit a salary expectation, if you will, to an arbitration panel, which is an unbiased third party outside of Major League Baseball. They decide which case is stronger, and then that case ends up being said, okay, we think you are owed this or you're owed this. So it can be a pretty hefty discrepancy. In most cases, what you want to hope is that teams are going to come together. In this case, with Bryce Harper and Jake Arrieta, they did. Now, Arrieta, I do believe, is going to be a free agent at the end of this coming season. Bryce Harper is arbitration eligible one more time this coming off season in 2017 and going into the 18 season. And then at the end of 18 is a free agent. And as a lot of you said on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham, everyone seems to think that Bryce Harper is heading to New York to wear pinstripes, no question. I have a hard time with that only because if that's the way that things begin to go, unless Bryce Harper reverts back to how he was really, back in 2015 with his MVP season, he's going to get absolutely destroyed. It's not going to go well, and I think that's where you're going to begin to see him begin to crack. It's not going to be a good thing, and there could be an issue there. I had a chance to sit down with Kevin Millar for just a couple of minutes. He gave his take on what he thinks is going to happen with the Cubbies and the Nationals. Here's what he had to say.
Here with Kevin Millar of MLB Network and Intentional Talk. First thing I want to ask, who's buying dinner, Lackey or you?
Lackey's got to buy dinner. He's way richer.
All right, fair enough answer. I don't know if you've heard a couple of big things, guys, avoiding arbitration. Jake Arrieta gets a 1-year deal with the Cubbies. Bryce Harper getting a 1-year arbitration deal with the Nationals. Is that enough to keep both of those teams on the top of their division and bring them into the postseason in 2017?
Well, yeah, the Cubs aren't going anywhere right now. They got a solid squad, as we all saw, and a lot of young talent in the Nationals. Same thing. I mean, they're right there, and you know what? The fun part about the season, it's a long season. A lot of things got to go right, but they're definitely favorites to get there.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And our thanks to Kevin Millar for taking just a few minutes with us while he was getting done with his round at the Diamond Resorts Invitational. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, right? The Cubs and the Nationals are expected to still be hot contenders. I don't think there's any reason to think that they're not going to be on top of their respective divisions. Now, we will see what happens with the Mets arms getting healthy again. And there is a possibility, if they're not careful, that the Mets may have just enough firepower, especially if Steven Strasburg can't stay healthy, that they may end up unseating the Nationals in the National League East. We caught up with Dan Plesac from MLB Network. Here's what he had to say on the Nationals' chances to stay alive on top of that division this season.
The Nationals struck out several times, trying to pick up Aroldis Chapman, Kenley Jansen, and now the Mets are going to be getting back 2 of those big 3 arms. Can the Nationals stay on top since they just avoided arbitration with Bryce Harper on a 1-year deal?
I think so. I think the worries for me right now is bullpen issues. We talked to Dusty Baker at the winter meetings in Washington, D.C., and they really don't know what they're going to do in the 8th and 9th inning right now. Love their starting rotation if Strasburg stays healthy. I think the big key is Bryce Harper. What guy are you going to have? The guy 2 years ago that was an NL MVP, or the guy last year you're waiting for him to get going? They're starting pitching. Max Scherzer has a little bit of a finger issue right now. Their pitching's good. I like their lineup. Daniel Murphy adds some pop at second base. Good team, but I do think if the Mets pitchers are healthy, the word I've heard is DeGrom and Syndergaard should be ready to go. Matt Harvey, the surgery was a success. If the Mets pitchers are back to being healthy, I think they're the team to beat in the East.
Thanks, Dan.
You got it.
And again, a lot of thanks to Dan Plesac for taking some time with us. I'm really interested to see what happens there. Chris and I went over that division a couple of weeks ago, and we both think that still with Daniel Murphy, Strasburg should be coming back healthy. Scherzer is going to be Max Scherzer. If Bryce Harper can do what he is supposed to do and Tanner Roark comes in as a solid third piece to really combat that big three in New York, I think, again, it makes sense that the Nationals should repeat. But there is always going to be that concern that maybe something comes up where it just doesn't quite work out. We will see going forward. Now, back to the big guys in free agency. Matt Wieters, Mark Trumbo, still don't know where they want to go. We've heard a couple of things that Matt Wieters has been courted. Now, rumors are the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. There were rumors that Mark Trumbo was being looked at by the Oakland Athletics, potentially maybe the Colorado Rockies, and there's a possibility even still that the Orioles have a chance at making a play with Mark Trumbo. There's very little coming out on both these sides, which really surprises me. And still Jose Bautista, we're not sure. It seems pretty likely he's going to end up landing back in Toronto, but still nothing up with that yet. I had a chance to catch up with the MLB Network's Mark DeRosa. Here's what he had to say on what's currently happening in free agency.
Hey guys, Graham here from The Grueling Truth. Here with Mark DeRosa out at the Diamond Resorts Invitational Golf Tournament. Mark, with the baseball season right around the corner, we're still waiting to see where Matt Wieters and Mark Trumbo are going to end up. Where do you think they're going to end up with we're being a month and a half out or less before spring training begins?
Man, I have no idea. When I think of Matt Wieters, I think of Georgia Tech and I think of the Atlanta Braves. They seem to be putting a stopgap team together to try and get him to the new regime coming up the minor league system. But at the end of the day, he is catching at such a premium now in the game. I think he'd be a great addition to them. Mark Trumbo, I mean, 40 homers will travel. So I can't believe he doesn't have a job yet. I'm also waiting on Jose Bautista. I played with Jose in 2013. I know he had an off year last year, but bottom line is when his leg kicks right, there's very few guys offensively that can do what he does. So I know he's got that draft pick attached to him. It's kind of killing him a little bit. But at the end of the day, those are the three guys that I'd like to see where they're going to go.
And thank you, Mark, again for taking some time with us. Really going to be interesting. He's exactly right. 40 homers will travel. Anybody is going to want that bat. I still think it would have made great sense to put him at first base with Miami. You back up Giancarlo Stanton. You try and get some young pieces there. You don't know what's going to happen. The Marlins are certainly a place that could use some help. And we actually caught up with Josh Beckett, a World Series winner with the Marlins. Here's what he had to say on how the Marlins could best do to go ahead and try and bolster that lineup and get back to their winning ways.
Now, the Florida Marlins, obviously, the Miami Marlins now suffered a horrible loss in the untimely death of Jose Fernandez. Absolutely rocked the entire baseball world and that community down there. And they did it's a beautiful thing, the way baseball works out, that first game back with the D. Gordon home run. But we've seen from the Marlins kind of some questionable management up on the upper side with the huge deal to Giancarlo Stanton. We've seen 2 World Series titles and the teams get completely broken down. From the outside looking in now that you've left, what do you think the Marlins need to do to try and at least compete on a more consistent basis in a pretty hard division right now with the Mets and the Nationals with 2 really strong rotations and some big bats in those lineups?
Yeah, I think they're just going to have to develop from within. It's just that market down there. I played in it long enough to kind of see the ins and outs of all that. I think those guys will get it straight. Mike Hill's a really smart man. Jeffrey Loria wants to win. it's just, they're going to have to build from within. They can't go out and get the, pay $100 million for a starting pitcher. It's going to be difficult in that market.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
So, guys, tell us what you think. At OO Left Field on Twitter. Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook. Also, the Out of Left Field community page. It's going to be interesting. I'm really curious to see where these guys land. I don't know yet. I would have thought it would have been no doubt happening early in January. We are about a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training, and still two or maybe three of the biggest names on the free agent market, probably the only three big names left, still don't have a home. So we will see where they end up going here, hopefully relatively soon. Now, back to what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We're going to try and get through this a little bit quicker. We're getting to the tail end of the Hall of Fame discussion. A lot of guys who are on the ballot for the first time, they're on it because they qualify. They are not going to make it. I doubt they're going to survive this first round of voting in their first year of eligibility, and we're not going to drub you over and over with just constant talking about guys who aren't going to make it. But one of the interesting pieces, one of the names who now is back in the headlines as he just signed a deal with a Japanese team, is Manny Ramirez, 44 years old, retired from professional baseball about 5 years ago, and obviously going to be a tale of two guys, right? A career that was, I don't want to say hampered, but clearly had what was in that is clearly tainted by steroid use. And he was accused of using deep into his career back in 2012 with the Tampa Bay Rays. Is one of the reasons that he retired. The main reason, actually, that he retired was because he was going to be facing a suspension and decided to go ahead and retire from Major League Baseball than serve that PED suspension. Now, Manny Ramirez, his numbers are fantastic. Let's not get that twisted. Over 2,500 hits. He has 555 home runs, over 1,800 RBIs, a 312 career batting average, a 996 OPS. That helps with a 411 on base. 1,329 walks, 813 strikeouts. So for being a power hitter, obviously we expect him to strike out more than he will walk. But for what we've seen in other guys who we've talked about in the Hall of Fame, those numbers are regularly consistent here. Now, Man-Ram played 19 seasons in the bigs, right? Unceremoniously disappearing at the end of his career. But 12-time All-Star, 9 times won the Silver Slugger. That's the second most Silver Sluggers in the history of the big leagues. He finished second in AL Rookie of the Year voting in 1994. He was not known for his glove, definitely known more for the antics in the outfield, walking into the Green Monster by himself, being the random cutoff man for no reason while he's laying on the outfield grass. But he still managed to post a decent .978 career fielding percentage while still being immortalized for, let's be honest, some of the funniest blunders of all time we've seen in the outfield. But his offensive numbers, they can't be ignored. It's a 312 batting average, the 83rd best all time. 411 on base, 32nd best. A 585 slugging, 8th best. 996 OPS, 8th best. In the last 57 years, 57 years, guys, only Barry Bonds has posted a higher OPS. Now, I know I'm going to get it. They took steroids. If Chris was here, he'd be saying they took steroids. It's tainted. Doesn't matter. I understand that the numbers may be skewed, as I have said many times. But to me, when it comes down to it, okay, it is still going to end up being about the fact that these guys played in an era, and in that era, they were the best of all time in that era. Period. End of the discussion. His postseason performances can't be forgotten. 23 postseason series, 285, a 394 on base, a 544 slugging. 117 hits, 29 long balls, and drove in 78, was a force to be reckoned with, the MVP of the 04 Fall Classic. I get it. He is unlikely to be elected, especially now that he's back playing again. The numbers are worthy. It's hard for me at this point because I have said on the record that I think the guys that juice past a certain point shouldn't get in. The fact that he took steroids certainly did not help his performance past the 08-09 year in the mid-2000s or late 90s. Yeah, it probably did. But I'm still not going to go ahead and leave somebody out just because they tested for this in an era where it was allowed. I actually had a chance also to ask Mark DeRosa that same question about who he thinks will go into the Hall, and he gave a pretty interesting take as well on the guys who have been accused of PED use. Take a listen.
Before I let you go, we have about just another week and a half or so until the Hall of Fame vote comes out. Who do you see as being the guys that are going to make it in on this ballot? About 34 guys on this ballot. Tim Raines, probably the biggest name who hasn't gotten in yet. And we're starting to see Edgar Martinez come in there, a DH who's kind of getting that feel of should a DH be in with Big Papi right around the corner. Does he set a precedent of making it in, or are they going to hold him out?
No, I think they set a precedent. I think Edgar, in his, I always look at it, did he dominate the sport when he was in the lineup? And Edgar Martinez did just that. Rock Raines deserves to be in. I think when you compare him to Ricky Henderson, everyone pales in comparison to Ricky Henderson, but he was one of the best players in his time. Jeff Bagwell's a guy I think deserves to be in. You run into the tricky situations. I get it with the PEDs, but at the end of the day, Barry Bonds is the greatest player I've ever had the opportunity to face or play against, and what he was able to do. So we will see. Mike Mussina is also interesting because he was so great for so long, and I think he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But
what about the Crime Dog? The Crime Dog is a guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, to me, it's kind of a travesty. He hasn't made it in yet, and I've been making that case. What's your take on Fred McGriff?
My take on Fred McGriff is that he should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, the numbers add out. You could tell he was a guy who did it the right way. He batted fourth in every lineup. That's how I look at it. At the end of the day, did you carry franchises in the middle of the order for longer than 10 years? I mean, his entire career, no matter where he played, whether it was San Diego, Toronto, Atlanta, I know that's where his bread was buttered, but he was always in the middle of the order and always making an impact. So that's it. The Hall of Fame's tricky for me to talk about because all those guys were so great. I was in such awe of them as a player. So, I mean, to me, it's funny. The PED stance, it's obviously lightning. You can tell by the percentages of votes the guys are getting now. And, hopefully one day guys like Roger Clemens, guys like Barry Bonds will be in.
Mark, thank you very much.
All right.
And thank you, Mark, for that. Couldn't agree more. I was surprised. Now, Justin Verlander was at this golf tournament as well. Didn't have a chance to talk to him. And he is squarely on the complete opposite side. He believes that if you took it, you shouldn't be in the game. You shouldn't be considered. Completely opposite. And would have loved to have a chance to talk with him. Just didn't work out. So, yes, I think Manny will go in. Vladimir Guerrero, another big piece, a guy who we are most likely going to see go in a first ballot this year. Almost 2,600 hits, one homer shy of 450, 4 RBI shy of 1,500, a 318 batting average, a 931 OPS, walked 737 times, and struck out 985. He had an outstanding 16-year career, a 9-time All-Star, 8 Silver Sluggers, AL MVP in 2004. His numbers quickly climbed, and he stayed at an elite level. In 97, his first full season in the majors, hit over 300, average never dipped below 300 until 2009. Over a dozen years, folks, that Vladimir Guerrero stayed above the 300 mark in batting average. Absolutely a fantastic statistic. A guy who was a consistent hitter, still had a great amount of pop in his bat. And even when he dipped below that 300 mark, it was 295. We're not talking about a precipitous drop. The guy played at an elite peak level, and he stayed there for a long, long time. Averaged 113 runs batted in and 34 homers per season. Couple that with never striking out more than 95 times in a single season, and only struck out more than 80 times twice in his career. The guy knew how to hit the ball. He had discipline. He had the ability to put the ball in play. Just because you aren't getting on base every single time you make contact with the ball, it is better than striking out. That's going to mean guys get a chance to move around the bases. You have a chance to make something happen. You make the defense go to work to try and make you not get on base. I like that about Vladimir Guerrero. His 250 intentional walks puts him 5th all time. That was 34% of his free passes. Now, granted, we know that Barry Bonds, we discussed a couple of weeks ago, leads the league in intentional walks. There's no question that he was walked an incessant number of times. Now, Vladimir Guerrero's 379 on base puts him in the upper third of the record books. His low strikeout numbers, as I said, show just how good he was at putting the ball in play. Glove wasn't the most flashy, underscored by a .963 fielding percentage, 125 career arrows, but he was a can't-miss type of guy. You knew who Vlad was. Yes, he played on the West Coast for a long time, but, man, you wanted to watch him play. If he was on the East Coast, if you had a chance to watch him, you wanted to. You never knew what he was going to do with that stick. The guy sits comfortably in the top 100 all-time in home runs, runs batted in, hits, extra base hits, slugging, OPS, and batting average. Undeniably, Vladimir Guerrero will be elected into the Hall of Fame. And with all the darkness surrounding so many players of his era, I expect Vladimir Guerrero to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer in 2017. Now that moves us over to a guy from, remembered a lot for his time in Boston, moved around a decent amount. That's Mike Cameron. Mike Cameron won 3 Gold Gloves during his 17-year career. That was in 01, 03, and 06. Now, granted, his first 2 seasons were 28 and 11 games respectively, so let's go ahead and say that 97 was his first official season as an MLB player. But he played in 116 games, which is pretty respectable. Offensive numbers over the course of his career were middle of the road, but they were consistent, and consistency is going to keep you in the league for a long time. His average always floated right around 250, never dipped below 200 though, which I'm impressed by. Wasn't a guy who was great at getting on base, but he regularly didn't go into too much of a deep slump. His on-base percentage is markedly higher than his batting average, which is good, a 249 career batting average to a 338 career on base. So pretty respectable, almost 90 points higher there. And his plate discipline clearly lacked, though he struck out twice the number of times he walked, 867 walks, 1,900 strikeouts. So if he wasn't putting the ball in play, he was going to whiff. So was still a liability, but could at least consistently hit 1 out of 4 trips. Was a decent, sometimes above average center fielder during his tenure in the big leagues. Was never the standout guy. One of his best seasons was with the 2001 Seattle Mariners when they set the record for the most wins in a season. Yes, he was productive. Yes, he was consistent. He's not going to Cooperstown. There's just no way. And that brings us to another outfielder, also played for the Red Sox, a time for the Braves as well. That's J.D. Drew. His brother Stephen Drew still in the big leagues. Drew played 14 seasons in the show. An all-star in 08, a lengthy career as an outfielder, won a ring with the Red Sox in 07. And he was a decent right fielder. Made less than 50 errors in his career, but his career overall wasn't that remarkable. He was injured a lot, only played more than 140 games 3 times in his career. It's 162 games in a season, guys. Not impressive when you're playing 14 years and only 3 times and you get over the 140 mark. He was notoriously patient at the plate. To some people, almost a detriment. He would rather walk than even sometimes take a swing. 862 walks, a 384 on base. He could be a strikeout concern, notched 100 or more strikeouts 6 times. He could be patient, but if he wasn't always the best at making contact. A 278 batting average will do that for you. He had an 873 career OPS. Couple that with a 489 slugging percentage. Drew was touted as one of the best prospects when he came in the bigs in 1998. But unfortunately for him, those expectations never materialized. And let's be honest, he was overpaid by the Red Sox, extremely overpaid at the tail end of a career that did not amount to what he was compensated for, which we see a lot, and especially in baseball with those guaranteed contracts. He's not going to be in the Hall. One of the guys who I said I will be surprised if he is on the ballot next year. I don't see much of a reason to keep him on. He's never going to get, in my opinion, enough votes to make it on there. Now, a catcher that we're really interested in. We talked about Ivan Rodriguez. Jason Varitek is yet to come. Jorge Posada, right? We have two captains. Really was considered kind of one of the captains of the Yankees. Granted, Jeter was the captain, and Varitek is always considered the captain of those Boston Red Sox. Jorge Posada played 17 seasons in the Bronx, 15 of them full seasons. Over 1,660 hits, a 5-time All-Star, 5-time Silver Slugger, all in the same years. Okay, so 5 really, really good years. Walked away with 4 World Series rings on his hand. Can't really complain about that. Was not a prolific catcher. He nabbed only 387 base stealers. That's a pretty nice number, except when you consider that was out of 1,371 attempts. 992 fielding percentage. It's magnified when you realize he made 92 errors in 17 major league seasons. So a relatively solid catcher fielding-wise. No gold gloves, but a decent bat. Ended up with 275 home runs and just over 1,000 runs driven in. His general stats aren't that impressive. I mean, be honest, they're relatively pedestrian, but he was on a team that was a dynasty in the late 90s, so everybody knew who he was. The only big thing we see him break the top 100 in is total strikeouts, which is kind of an inauspicious fact. He has 1,453 career Ks. So, I mean, when you're breaking the top 100 in a negative stat, it's going to be hard to get yourself into the hall when nothing else really stands out that much. His advanced defensive numbers as a catcher are indicative of a player who is able to stay relatively healthy, which is important in a game like baseball, especially as long and grueling as it is, and was a decent field general on a team that won 3 straight titles. As beloved as he is, and he's already earned a place in Monument Park, that's as far as he's going to go post-career. He'll be a part of Yankees lore forever. He'll be a legend in the Bronx forever, but he is not going to be a legend who sees enshrinement into Cooperstown. Guys, a reminder that we are part of the Grueling Truth Network. Stop by thegruelingtruth.net. Check out everything going on with the up-and-coming Super Bowl 51. We had a chance to talk with Brian Urlacher and Patrick Peterson also at the Diamond Resorts Invitational. That is up at The Grueling Truth. So again, thegruelingtruth.net, at Grueling Truth on Twitter, and The Grueling Truth on Facebook. That's The Grueling Truth, where legends speak. Coming up next is Maglio Ordonez, a guy who played for quite a few teams, a decent pop in his bat, over 2,000 hits, just shy of 300 home runs. Played 15 years, 14 full for the White Sox and the Tigers. 6-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger, second in the MVP voting in 2007 to Alex Rodriguez. Granted, we know now that Alex Rodriguez was undeniably, I think at that point, cheating, so probably got left out of what should have been an MVP year for Mags. Unfortunately, while he managed to play in the World Series once, it was with the Tigers in 2006, who lost, not the White Sox, whom he left the year prior when they won it all in 2005. Now, Ordonez was a player who, when healthy, could smack the baseball. Topped out at a career-high 38 home runs in 2002. Triple digits in RBI 7 times, over 20 home runs 8 times. A good, consistent outfielder, averaged 26 homers, 108 ribbies per season, only struck out 200 or more times than he walked, 651 walks, 852 strikeouts. I mean, his place in the record books is still middle of the road. Very few things was he stellar at, but he was a player that could be put in the lineup, give constant production. You knew what you were going to get. Obviously not when you were going to get it, but you get the drift that I'm going for here, and he could do it consistently. An average fielder with a .987 fielding percentage, never had a gold glove, but could be counted on in right field to be a steady piece of leather and make his mark with the stick. He was a staple of both the Sox and the Tigers. Consistency did not provide enough numbers to get him into Cooperstown. That brings us to Derek Lee, a guy who, I mean, if you look at his numbers, granted he's 41 hits shy of 2,000, clubbed 331 home runs and just over 1,000 runs batted in. Played 15 Major League seasons, 2 All-Star games, 3 Gold Gloves, 1 Silver Slugger. Was a free swinger. Went down on strikes almost twice as often as he walked. Never walked more than 98 times in a season, but struck out over 100 times in 12 seasons. really, really poor plate discipline there. His career year was in 2005, finished third in MVP voting after he hit safely 199 times, 46 home runs, drove in 107, the first of only 2 times he hit over 100 runs batted in, and had a .335 batting average and a 1.080 OPS. It's a great year, and for that great year, he finished third in the MVP voting. He was a solid player, played over 1,900 games at first base, a good fielding percentage, committed less than 100 errors in his career, but he might be on the ballot for a couple of years. I'd be surprised if he lasted more than 4. But Derek Lee, again, another guy who won't see the Hall of Fame. And just a few more to go here, guys. Not many more to get to. Edgar Renteria, Melvin Mora, and Carlos Guillen, guys that pretty much have almost the same kind of numbers. Mora and Guillen have numbers even less impressive than Renteria's. No reason to have pointless diatribe about these guys. I'll give you the quick stuff on Renteria. He's got 2 World Series rings, one with the Marlins, I believe in 97, and also with the 2010 Giants, where he won the MVP for that World Series. Got to give him credit there. He was a shortstop, a pretty good fielder, made 272 career errors, but over 2,100 defensive games played, had over 2,300 hits, but a really basic 140 home runs and 923 runs batted in. A .286 batting average, .343 on base, couldn't crack 400 in slugging, and struck out about a little over 1,100 times, 1,182 to be exact. Postseason numbers just about as basic, hit .252 in the postseason, struck out 39 times. A solid player, was able to play many, many seasons in the big leagues, but Edgar Renteria, Melvin Mora, Carlos Guillen, not going to see the Hall of Fame, nor will Casey Blake. In 13 years, Casey Blake played in only 1,265 games, 8 seasons over 100 games played, pedestrian numbers, only had 2 seasons where he hit 159 hits. He's not going to go in. I don't want to bore you guys with someone who we know is going to be off the ballot come next season. Now, here are the 2 guys probably on this list who are going to be the most familiar. There is one more who I think who might be interesting here, but let's go ahead and get to these 2 former Red Sox. That's Jason Varitek and Tim Wakefield, the captain and the knuckleballer, right? Varitek played a decade and a half, all with the Red Sox, 3 All-Star games, 1 Gold Glove, and 1 Silver Slugger in 2005. Both the Gold Glove and Silver Slugger came in 2005. And Varitek was a staple in Beantown, no question about it, most notably for taking his catcher's mitt and introducing it to Alex Rodriguez's face, but he's still a staple in Boston. He was never known for big pop with the stick, surpassed 20 homers only 3 times, never crested 100 RBI. Defensively, committed 69 errors from catcher position, which is pretty good. It's 12th all-time with putouts as a catcher. The negative, though, he only threw out 23% of base stealers and allowed 992 stolen bases. That number of stolen bases allowed is the 35th worst in Major League Baseball history. Now to Tim Wakefield, a 200-game winner, lost 180 games, so a .526 winning percentage, a 4.41 career ERA, had 22 career saves, 1,200 walks, just over 2,100 strikeouts. Tim Wakefield saved his career when he learned how to throw a knuckleball. There's no question about it. Go on to Netflix and watch the documentary. It has saved guys' careers because how easy it is on the shoulder, on the elbow, but it's hard to master as well. And it's hard to control. R.A. Dickey, probably the one guy who can actually relatively pinpoint where he wants a baseball to go. Spending his first 2 seasons with the Pirates before he was sent back down to the minors, eventually was acquired by the Sox. He spent 17 of his 19 professional seasons in Beantown with 1 All-Star Game appearance. Now, 200 wins is nothing to laugh at. It's fantastic. But only 11 of his 19 seasons were winning seasons. He's near the top 50 in earned runs allowed, home runs allowed, and walks issued. He won 2 rings He's already been enshrined in the Red Sox Hall of Fame along with his teammate Jason Varitek, and that is where those two will stay immortalized after they are long gone in the Major League Baseball realm of thought. Now, the one guy I told you who might make you think a little bit is a guy by the name of Orlando Cabrera. Also won a ring with the 04 Sox, with the aforementioned Tim Wakefield and Jason Varitek. His numbers were jumping. Majority of the seasons he played, he'd see maybe a 20 to 30-point change from the previous year in batting average. So you didn't always know what you were going to get. He hit 301 once and crested 290 twice. Not a great on base, a 272 batting average and a 317 on base percentage. If you add in the 390 slugging, it gives him a 707 OPS. Now, he did win 2 Gold Gloves in 01 and 07. Both were at shortstop, although he finished his career with a 977 fielding percentage and 188 errors. That's averaging 12.5 errors per season. Most Hall of Fame candidates, as I've said, are not voted in due to defense. I mean, the leather is a piece where I think it should be accounted for, but the Hall of Fame is granted more of an offensive hall. But Cabrera had a pretty long and relatively productive career. Numbers are solid for a shortstop. Had very few seasons undercut by injury. Played in 130 or more games in 10 of his 15 years. The difficulty here is that while his numbers may not jump off the page at you, they mirror Tim Raines actually really closely in some regards. Now, Raines played 8 more seasons than Cabrera, which is even more impressive. The question then becomes, at what point do we look at the era in which Tim Raines played, as Mark DeRosa alluded to when we spoke to him this weekend, and then when Orlando Cabrera played? I mean, obviously, Cabrera is not going to be a first ballot kind of guy. He may never see enshrinement. I don't know. I doubt he will. But he'll be a player talked about for a few years. And I think he'll be a guy who may end up deserving it, who might kind of be that Tim Raines character who did relatively decent, but just never has quite gotten enough push. The problem Orlando Cabrera is going to see is with all the huge names that are going to be entering the ballot here in the next 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to be very hard for him to keep the necessary number of votes to even stay alive on the ballot. Now, the only guy probably that is going to have a name that most of you will recognize is, well, let's go to the last couple: Freddie Sanchez, Arthur Rhodes, and Matt Stairs. None of these guys are going to be in the Hall. Sanchez had a 10-year career, less than 1,000 total games. You're not going to get in the Hall under 1,000 games as an everyday player. He won a ring, a 3-time All-Star, doesn't have a single statistic or the longevity, in my opinion, to even warrant discussion into the Hall. Arthur Rhodes, another guy, a relief pitcher primarily, had a couple of seasons where he was a starter, finished with an 87-70 record, 900 career games, and an ERA, though, just over 4. Longevity was certainly his strength, but neither he nor Matt Stairs are going to see the Hall of Fame, where Matt Stairs' numbers were relatively pedestrian throughout the tail of his career. The one name and the last name actually on the Hall of Fame ballot that some of you all might remember is Pat Burrell, a 2-time World Series champion in 2008 with the Phillies, and the Giants picked him up in 2010 to help solidify that first World Series title that they garnered. Almost 50%, 607 of his 1,393 career hits were extra base hits. That's an impressive stat. More often than not, we're seeing guys close to 3,000 hits and maybe getting 800, maybe 9, not normally cresting that 1,000 extra base hit plateau. So impressive here that at least 50% of Pat Burrell's career hits, or right about there, were extra base hits. Now, over his 12-year career, he only crested the century mark in RBIs twice. Only hit better than 280 twice. That's 02 and 05. Never won a Gold Glove or a Silver Slugger. Received MVP consideration only twice, and that was in 02 and 05. 14th and 7th, respectively, so still nothing great. Finished 4th in NL Rookie of the Year voting. Struck out over 110 times every season from 2000 to 2010, an 11-year stretch of 110-plus strikeouts, not the kind of discipline that you want to see. His walks did have a steady rise, though, for the first 8 years of his career. But, I mean, it's just nothing that's going to really stand out and say, I'm a Hall of Fame candidate here. He was a staple in the city of brotherly love for 9 seasons, clubbed 251 of his 292 career homers with the Phillies. Postseason stats did not measure up to his regular season numbers in the box at all. In 2015, the Phillies inducted him into their Wall of Fame. Again, similar with Tim Wakefield, similar with Jason Varitek, Jorge Posada. That is where Pat Burrell will stay with the Philadelphia Phillies on their Wall of Fame, the 2 World Series rings on his fingers, and that, guys, wraps up our travels through the Hall of Fame ballot. Now, the nice thing is, in about 3 days, that should be the 18th on Wednesday, that is when the Hall of Fame vote comes out. We will be doing a YouTube video, a special video with the Hall of Fame discussing who got in, what we think, who's still going to be on the ballot next year. We will talk about all of those things coming up here on Wednesday. Now, gets us into really the tail end of the show. That's going to be I'm going to touch really, really briefly here on the N.L.West because I want to save a lot of this for when Chris gets back. Obviously, being a guy out on the West Coast, I mean, that's much more up his alley than mine because he lives out there, clearly. We're looking at teams, as we always do, the first and the worst. Now, without a doubt, it was the Los Angeles Dodgers who won the division last year. The Giants had an absolutely epic postseason collapse, the likes of which I certainly hope we don't see again next year. And the Padres, the worst team. Now, the interesting thing here, obviously we discussed this a couple of months ago. The San Diego Padres had the big issue where their GM was suspended for a year for falsifying these medical documents and several trades with multiple teams, but he was retained by the Padres. So it's going to be interesting to see what the San Diego Padres need to do, or I don't want to say what they need to do. It's similar to the Oakland Athletics. They're going to need a lot of work. Now, I did have a chance, and again, with many of the players we had a chance to talk with out at the Diamond Resorts Invitational. Former Major League Baseball pitcher Mark Mulder was there, an avid golfer, ended up winning the celebrity side of the golf tournament. And he we discussed this last week, but he actually gave some quick thoughts on what the Oakland Athletics, who we just mentioned, need to do and what might help them draw some more players. Have a listen here.
Here with former Major League pitcher Mark Mulder, played for the Oakland A's and the St. Louis Cardinals. Mark, you were part of really kind of one of the first big threes in the 2000 era with you, Tim Hudson, and Barry Zito, and we've seen that really begin to explode more so now than it was in the 90s when really Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz were the big ones we had seen. Playing in Oakland, I know you still live in that area and we're working for the organization. What do the Athletics really need to do to make themselves competitive? Because they've been struggling for so long. We had that one big year, and then pieces are beginning to fall off. I know the Coliseum is a big piece, but what do they need to do to attract more and really begin to make a stamp?
Well, I think a stadium is first and foremost. I remember when young in my career, hey, we're going to have a stadium in a couple of years. That was 2000 to 2004 when I was there. So, now here we are. There's still no new stadium. So, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where you'd love to see it get done, and I know a lot depends on the Raiders because of the stadium. So you'd like to see something get resolved and get that new stadium because that would create a lot of money. Billy doesn't have a whole lot to work with. What they have to spend is somewhat limited. It's unfortunate, but it's what they are, and they got to rely on drafting. And so far in the recent years, that hasn't been as good.
And thank you, Mark, again for stopping by and having a chat with us. We really do appreciate your time. You wouldn't think a stadium, but when he's saying it for over 15 years, 17 years now, they've been saying we're going to have a stadium, and they haven't. And we're hearing about sewage backups and all these issues here. Sometimes the little things can be really, really big things. And in Oakland, I have to agree with them. Now, as far as the Padres go, a couple of things coming up here. First thing is Will Myers looking on a 6-year deal with the Padres. That is being shown that is on the way in here. So that would be a good piece for them. Solarte also signs a 2-year extension with them. Decent third baseman. Nothing fantastic. It's the Padres, right? And they need clearly some work here. But the fact that you're at least actually seeing them try to get some guys. Will Myers has been a guy who has kind of traveled a little bit, played for the Rays for a while. An okay year last year. Right about at career average for him. A .259 batting average, .336 on base, hit 28 home runs. So at least decent there, and that's with his second full season in San Diego. You're not going to see a lot. There was a lot of expectation from Will Myers, and it hasn't been anything fantastic. There's a lot of pieces that the Padres need. They have clearly been sellers recently. Andrew Cashner left. Matt Kemp left. They brought in a ton of pieces early with the Upton brothers. They brought in Matt Kemp. They brought in the Red Sox closer Craig Kimbrell from the Braves. So many pieces were brought in, and it was expected that, oh my God, the Chargers are going to contend, and they're going to contend right now. And it just never materialized. They are in the midst of a rebuilding. There is no question about it. It's going to take plenty of time for it to happen. I can't really target one thing that they need. Obviously good starting pitching is a great place to start. They have some veterans on that team. Jared Weaver is out there. Might not be the worst thing to bring in a veteran if you can bring him in at a reasonable price. See what you can do. There's no reason to spend the money on Mark Trumbo or Matt Wieters or Jose Bautista. Plus, with Bautista, you lose the draft pick, as Mark DeRosa said when we talked to him. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's what Chris and I had discussed this week before he went on vacation. It was the same thing, that there's really nothing going on that the Padres can do that's going to really gonna build them up. The Dodgers have made some huge moves. Absolutely huge moves. We discussed it, put it up on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham, also on our Twitter page, at OO Left Field on Twitter. It's going to be a big year. Clayton Kershaw should come back healthy. Kenley Jansen re-signed. Justin Turner re-signed. Big pieces. You have a smart and a great guy at the hot corner and a great closer. Are we going to see the Dodgers able to stay on top of the Giants? I don't know. I still think that when it comes down to it, the Giants have the better roster. It pains me to say it. It's why I'm doing it when Chris is not here with me. But the Giants, from the outside looking in, they have the better roster, especially when it comes to a pitching rotation, right? And we're going to get into those guys next week. And we had a chance to talk with Dan Plesac, and he also talked with us about the National League West, and we'll get that for you next week when we break down the Giants. And we're going to touch on the Dodgers a little bit more. As far as what they need to do to continue or to stay on top, the same thing that they did. They need to play a little bit better than 500 baseball, which is about what they were at. Need to have more wins. As long as our bullpen is going to be strong, and if they move up from where they have been, they should be fine. Bud Norris is not there. Interested to see where he lands. I hope somewhere good soon. But everything you have in there is going to look good. Kike Hernandez is going to come back. Corey Seager's coming back. Justin Turner is still there. They re-signed him. You have Agon. You have Puig. We'll see what happens with Yasiel Puig. I still think he's going to be a piece that they look to move near the deadline unless he gets hot and he just continues to play ticked off, strong, hard baseball and play smart baseball. And the other piece you're going to have to look at is Jock Peterson. Started off lightning hot when he got into the big leagues, and his average has slowly declined. Last year, he's averaging .224 for his Major League Baseball career, a .349 on base, just nothing impressive yet. It's certainly there. The opportunity for Jock Peterson is there. It's just a matter of him being able to step up, take it, find his stroke, get some balls and start falling in for him and get on a bit of a rhythm. I hope to see him improve. But, again, we're going to see what happens with him. A lot of things left to see. We will see what happens. It's going to be interesting. As we've said, pitching has really been the big thing, and as it will continue to be the big thing. We will talk to you guys again. Middle of the week should be a really enjoyable week as the Hall of Fame ballot gets ready to be unveiled. If you guys want to get in touch with us, again, please do at OO Left Field on Twitter. Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham. Please like the page. Interact with us. We want to interact with you. You have ideas. You want to talk. Give us some grief. We'd love to have you do it. Also, feel free to email us. At ooleftfield@gmail.com. Guys, Chris will be back next week. He and I will be going at it, and you will get the full Chris Furry experience when we get into the San Francisco Giants. Going to be a great show. Get ready for a crazy week with the Hall of Fame. We might just get an answer where Matt Wieters and Mark Trumbo land. If we do, you will find out here. Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham. See you guys on Wednesday.